Passover's coming up where we have very specific food laws, and that's the best time to make some gluten-free food because we can't have anything with leavening agents in it. So one of the things that you can have is cabbage rolls, and I happen to love them. Then I will also show you dessert that I make all the time for Passover, and it will be lovely. So in here, the first thing I want to show you, which I show in all my classes, which everybody's asking me if I'll start to sell, I'm not. My mother used to have people over constantly. There was 5 of us kids, and every day our doorbell would ring at about 5 o'clock so that people knew they could join us for supper. My mom was a very, very good cook. Didn't like cooking, but was a very good cook. So she invented this. It was called Rose's green stuff. Now it doesn't sound like it should nowadays, now that everything is legal. Rose's green stuff is a much healthier thing, but now I make it, and I make it at work all the time, and people call it Sara's green stuff. My mom is the one who actually invented it. So in my Cuisinart, you add onions, probably about 3 of them. I have nice wash. Make sure you do right now, especially, or always, wash all of your fresh herbs. We have to be very careful who's touching what, and we have to make sure it's all washed. So I had this all soaking. My favorite fresh herbs to put in this are always parsley, dill, basil, parsley being the most important, onions, and loads of garlic. Then we keep this in the fridge, can keep as long as 3 months. It seems to have some unusual chemical, this is a handful of garlic, probably a whole clove of garlic. Seems to have an unusual chemical reaction where everything stays fresh and stays good. I don't know how it happens. My mother has always had it in her fridge, and it never went bad. Now, if you're afraid to do that, just put it in ice cube trays, let it freeze, and then pop it out when you need it. I use it for absolutely everything. I'll be using it today, and I'll show you what I do with it. It stops you from having to chop up more onions and chop up more garlic. Like I said, my mother constantly had people visiting us for supper, and if it meant adding to her supper, that was always easy because it was just a tablespoon of my mom's green stuff in whatever she was making instead of chopping up more onions and chopping up more garlic and chopping up more fresh herbs. I will use this in everything. Lasagna, I put a tablespoonful. In the cabbage rolls, I'm going to put some in. You'll find that it keeps your hands from smelling like onions and garlic because you never have to touch it for the next 3 months. You just put a tablespoonful in everything. So I think you've seen, I've put the basil, dill, parsley, garlic, and onions in here, and I put a little bit of oregano in. Get whatever spice you can at the store, just not mint. The only time I would use mint is if I was doing lamb. But mint is a little too sweet for this, so that's one I just don't use in this. So you just put everything in here, close off your Cuisinart, and I'll just press pulse until you'll see it's just a minced up, chopped up, green stuff. Once in a while I will stop it to make sure the herbs are getting in there. I will add a little bit more onion because the weight of the onion helps the herbs go down and get chopped. So this huge thing of herbs will go down into this whole Cuisinart bowl, and it's delicious and it smells so good. So people always say to me, gee, that looks just like pesto. In a way it kind of does, but really it's just a nice ground up bunch of spices, herbs, onions, garlic, and I'm just going to throw a nice heaping tablespoon, probably 2 tablespoons, into my ground beef. I will finish doing the rest of those, everything you see me have in this bowl, and I will just put it in a nice jar, and that will be keeping in my fridge for a very long time. I have that in here. Now you don't have to put a bunch of seasonings, herbs. You don't even really need salt in here because everything in here is going to give it so much flavor. So it's wonderful. Now I'm going to put some rice in it. I like quite a bit of rice in. And I will put some water in, and then I'm going to mush it together with my hands. I'm going to come back in a minute to show you how we roll it out. In here I have my green stuff, which looks a lot like pesto, but the beauty of this is there's no oil in it, there's no seasonings, salt and pepper in it, nothing. It's just those herbs I showed you. I did put about a teaspoon of salt in here. I'm gonna put a little bit of water in, using my favorite utensil, which is my hands, and I'm going to start just mushing it around. There was nothing I like better than coming home to know my mother had made cabbage rolls. They do take about 3 hours in the oven. Somebody told me that they don't really work in a convection oven. I actually haven't tried it very much in a convection oven. If you happen to have a steam oven, it's really great to steam the cabbage leaves in there. You don't even have to pull apart the cabbage. You just throw the entire head of cabbage in a steam oven. Both Wolf and Miele make a beautiful combi steam oven, which does lots. And you can just put the whole head in there and put it on steam, and your leaves just come apart. Here, what I did was I took out the insides of a cabbage, not right now. You just put your knife all the way around like this, and then put it that side down in a pot with water and let it boil. The leaves start to come off by themselves. You pull them apart, and then you have the nice soft leaves to start making your cabbage rolls. Now, my Epicure friends have been doing lots of videos lately too. This is one of my favorite pots from Epicure. Epicure, this is a steam pot. You can make popcorn in it. You can make steam things in it. You can put it in the oven. It's beautiful. So normally you would cut up some onions and put them in the garlic in the bottom. And you also cut up some of the parts of the cabbage that simply are too hard to be used for rolling. So I'm just putting pieces of cabbage in. They are very good this way. Then you just sort of mix that around the bottom. We haven't made our sauce yet. I'm going to show you how to roll it, and then I will show you how we make our sauce. So here we have one nice cabbage leaf. As you can see, this center part can be taken out if it's too hard. Mine's not too hard. Take a little bit of hamburger meat. Now, some people put pork and hamburger meat. Some people just put hamburger meat. I just like lean ground beef. This is 3 pounds of meat that I have here, and about a cup of rice. So did you see that? I just pull it over like this and fold it, and then roll it and put it seam side down in my pot. I'll show that one more time, but with this leaf, you'll see this center is a little too hard. It won't soften. So I'm going to throw that in the bottom. It will cook in the bottom. Again, a nice bit of the beef. Roll it around and roll it around like this. And you put them in, and you start stacking them quite tightly, actually, like this. Now, one of my children does not like the cabbage part of cabbage rolls, but loves the cabbage roll essence. So on top of this, I will also make some meatballs of the same thing. I throw them just on top with exactly the same sauce I'm just going to show you how to make, and they are so good. And I make a little bit of spaghetti squash, and then they have it with the spaghetti squash on the side, just a steamed spaghetti squash. Now, although this is Epicure's steaming unit, I actually am going to put it in an oven. I will cook it at 350 for about 3 hours, and this will be cooked, but not before I show you how the sauce is going on. So I'll be back in a second with all these rolled, and I will show you the lovely sauce we're going to put on. Be back in a second, everyone. Back for a minute here just to show you how to make the sauce. So here's my rolled cabbage rolls in the Epicure silicone pot, and then I added a few meatballs, like I said. Then I realized I was running out of cabbage, so I grabbed my peppers and I cut them in half, took the seeds out, and then I put the same meat with the same spices in the red peppers and made more meatballs, and this will be the exact same recipe. So there's 2 meals made from the exact same things. A nice heaping tablespoon of my green stuff, a nice big 1 liter of tomato juice, and my Auntie Shirley showed me this one. My mom used to add brown sugar and some lime juice, some lemon juice. This is just the Heinz chili sauce. If you put some of this in, it actually makes it nice and sweet. not too sweet, but just the perfect amount of sweetness. And you can add ketchup to it if you want. You can add tomatoes, crushed tomatoes, whatever you want. I just like to add the simple sauce. If when it comes out, I think it needs to be a little bit thicker, I will add some chopped tomatoes to it and put it back in the oven for a bit. So here's my Staub pot, which I truly love as well. So it's my cast iron pot. It will sit like this, and it actually has little steam holes, so it will sort of steam it as well. So now here's our sauce. Couldn't have been simpler because of the green stuff. I didn't have to chop up anything. Now I'm just gonna pour this over. I'll pour it over this one. I'll put the lids on both, bake it at 350 for about 3 hours. And I will show you the finished product. Now I always talk about smell-o-vision. Now it smells good, but you didn't want to be here when the cabbage was boiling. That is not a good smell. But this is a really good smell. So you make sure that the tomato sauce that we've just made gets right to the bottom if possible, although it will bubble up and go over. And see you in 3 hours for this finished delicious product, one of my favorite meals. Be back in a bit. Good morning. It's quite early and it's the morning of Passover on Wednesday. So I'm making our Passover dessert, which is my favorite dessert to make. It's actually a dessert that originates in Australia, but it's the perfect dessert. It's gluten-free. It has no yeast in it, no flour in it. All good for Passover. So this is why I look a little disheveled, because it's early. I haven't done up anything. Overnight, I put out 4 egg whites, and they're room temperature. So that's what's in here is 4 egg whites. And a good trick to making any meringue is if there's any oil, my dog, if there's any oil or anything in your bowl, it's not going to whip up nicely because it has to be completely clean of all oils. So I rub my bowl quickly with some vinegar, and that takes the acid takes off any of the oil. Here I'm just going to beat this up for a few minutes until it starts to rise. So you'll see it's only right here right now, and it's yellow. Give me a second, and you'll see how nice and thick it is. Okay, if you can see in here now, it's become nice and foamy, but it hasn't come quite to a peak. It's just nice and foamy. So I'm going to add half a teaspoon of cream of tartar, and the cream of tartar brings it up very well. I'm going to add a teaspoon of vinegar. I know that seems strange, but that is what I'm adding. And then, just to give it some nice fluff in a minute, I'm going to add half a tablespoon of cornstarch. So I'm just going to sprinkle that everywhere. And then very slowly, as it's coming up, I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla too, because I love vanilla in everything. A little bit of vanilla. And the reason I'm doing this early is I'm going to bake it at 250 for an hour. And then I'm going to turn off the oven, but leave it in, leave the oven slightly ajar, and then it dries it out. So the Pavlova is a beautiful thick meringue, and then we're going to top it later with whipping cream and fresh fruit. So here I'm going to keep beating, and I'll show you what it looks like when it is completely thick meringue. I'm slowly going to be adding sugar as I go. This is going to be noisy, so we'll come back in a minute. Okay, I'm turning this off. I want to show you when I lift it. This is how thick it's going to be. So remember, we used that little tiny bit. I'd say it was just about not quite half a cup of egg white. You can also buy just the egg whites just from the store in a little carton, and then you don't waste all the yolks, but you can always make something with the yolks. I have another recipe that I make with the yolks. Oh, my cat decided to visit. Isn't that nice? She can't eat this though. Say hello, Olivia. So how we know that this is ready is you feel it. If you can't feel the sugar grains in it, then you've done your job. Now, I normally would make one big circle of this, but there's only 4 of us, sadly, for Passover tonight. Usually I have more like 20 or 30 people. So because it's just the 4 of us actually eating tonight, I'm just going to make us 4 individual ones, which, that's my oven preheating to 250. It doesn't take too long to do that. So this whipped up just beautifully. I'll probably make more than 4 because when everybody generally leaves my house after, although nobody's going to be here tonight, I like to eat another one when nobody's left. This is really a very good dessert. Actually, if anybody's on sort of eating plan, this is the perfect dessert. You can actually use it with some Splenda. You don't have to put sugar in it. And truthfully, there's very little sugar if you divide it between everybody. So this would feed 6 people anyway, easily, or 2 people if it's me and my husband. So now we're just gonna take the back of the spoon and I'm just gonna make it smooth. It's gonna rise a little bit in the oven. Doesn't have to be pretty. You can also do this in a springform pan. And yes, I'm using my fingers. And you make a little bit higher on the sides, a little bit lower in the middle, because that's going to hold all of our whipped cream and our berries and a little bit of chocolate, because that's the way to do it. So we're just making these as pretty as we can, just going around, and we'll see you back here with the finished product, and you'll see exactly what it looks like. And although it looks not like much, this is delicious. The other thing you can do is you can add chocolate chips and maybe an almond, and this makes delicious meringue cookies. You just, of course, don't do them this large, and then you bake those, and they're just beautiful also for Passover, for any gluten-free diet. The beauty of Passover for celiacs, like my best friend, is you just can eat almost anything because there is no flour, no yeast. Although it's not the flour that's actually a problem, just because we're worried that the flour may have been in contact with a leavening product, we just stay away from flour, and instead we eat matzo meal, which is a ground up cracker. It's not made of mozzarella cheese. So here we'll be back in a bit, and you will see these finished products, and we can have them with our cabbage rolls later, although there's lots of other traditional food to have tonight for Passover. See you in a bit. Here's the finished product of the Pavlova we made this morning. I let them sit for an hour at 250 in the oven, then I turned off the oven and just let them sit. They're nice and hard, but they're also light as air. I normally whip my own cream, but it's Passover. We've had a lot to cook today, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the pretend but real stuff. You can add any fruit you want to this. I have different berries. I have some blueberries, some blackberries, some strawberries. You can make it as pretty as you want, or as not pretty as you want, whatever you like. And then to finish it off, I normally grate some chocolate or Toblerone on. Today I'm being super fancy. I'm just gonna put one nice piece of Toblerone in the middle, and when we eat it, we can enjoy by breaking it apart ourselves. Enjoy, everybody. Happy Easter, happy Passover, and I hope you love this dish as much as we do.